So it's kind of given us a way of making sure that email is like a we problem more than like a you problem. Like even if one person doesn't get back to that email, like somebody will because we're all monitoring the box.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Automated Lawyer Podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Fritz, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dan Schnurbush. Dan, what's going on this week?
Morning, John. This week I'm ready to go. Last week I spent most of the week learning JavaScript, actually. I've been studying programming in my free time because it is some of the most fun I've had in a long time. I just have been really getting into the details of, HTML and CSS and JavaScript and how are people doing this, because I've been wanting to see, with this automation stuff, is there more we can do with code? And it's also just fun. So, building your own little web page and be like, hey, I made it move. Cool. So that was my week last week. And this week, just ready to do whatever the world brings at me today. So how about yourself?
I'm having a great week, a good weekend, but when it comes to JavaScript and HTML and all of the actual code stuff, that's where I draw the line. Okay, I don't have any desire to actually code. Like I have all the desire to play with and build no code tools, but I don't have any desire to go down that path. I'll just leave that to experts like yourself and other people out there that can get into the weeds. So
yeah, it is wild though. And part of the thing that kind of fueled that fire again too is I don't know if people are paying attention. Probably not. Probably mostly people in the code space paying attention to this. But there was a couple of weeks ago, I think it might have been a little further back, a tool called Cursor dropped in the kind of web development space, which has basically taken your normal code editor and then added AI to it. So now your entire code base, so every line of code that you've written can be embedded in a vector database behind the scenes where you can't even see it. That's just what the app does, is it embeds your code. And then it has a little AI bot in the chat window or even inside the code. And you can just be like, hey, I need you to write this function, or I need you to, fix this API programming that's not very good. And it will just go through and spit out like all the corrections to your code. And it is just insane how fast it is. People on Twitter and stuff I guess it's X now, are losing their minds. And then like last week, Replit, or just a few days ago, a company called Replit, that they do a lot of cloud hosting for SaaS applications. They launched the first web development AI agent. So it's not just like a chatbot where you ask it and it will give you some answers. It's an agent where you can tell it, hey, write me a web page with these features. And then you can see it in real time. It'll like create the plan. Like, here's what we're going to do. Here's the step-by-step plan that I'm going to execute on. And then it fractionalizes itself into like subversions that go out and accomplish each task in tandem. And then after like 2 minutes, you have like a fully functioning basic application. It is weird, but things are about to get really strange in like software development and like people building their own things in their free time with no coding experience, and weird stuff is coming down the pipe.
I mean, the first thing that came to my mind is, one is that I can get on board with, a bot agent I'm telling it what to do in general layman's terms, and it's going out and telling other, bots to build and then building and writing code for me. I can definitely get on board with that. But my second thought was, what's going to happen to all these people who are just straight programmers who are writing code, right? Like that's what they do, and they're learning all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you turn around tomorrow, there's an application that replaces that sort of skill set. I mean, is that a problem or no?
I think you'll get mixed reactions out there, but I think the reality is like somewhere in between, similar to like in our profession. I think like, the bots, like they can't build, if you look at like a modern enterprise level application, like there might be thousands and thousands and thousands of pages worth of code that all, cross references each other. And at this point, the models just don't have enough context to like hold all that in memory to be able to act on it in a serious way. Well, you can act on pieces of it, and it can help you be. So mostly, I think it's going to have the same effect that it's had with attorneys. Is that it makes you faster.
Yeah.
It helps you answer questions. It helps you execute more efficiently, more quickly. But it's not yet at the point where it can fully replace you, and it still makes mistakes. Like they don't usually hallucinate code, but like they'll pull the wrong function, which I guess is kind of the equivalent of hallucination or something. Like they'll refer to a function by the wrong name or something like that. So it still makes mistakes. And it'll be a little while yet, not long, I don't think, before that some of those pieces are ironed out. Um, but it's wild. I mean, in the same time, I think it was Spellbook. I don't know if you get the ads for like Spellbook AI on your Facebook. Um,
Not yet.
they're a legal contract AI tool, and they're like a plugin for your word manipulator or
Yeah.
Microsoft Word. And it basically adds your AI chatbot into your Word document. And they launched what are they calling it, like AI agent associate or whatever, a couple of weeks ago for the same thing, where you're supposed to be able to like tell it, hey, go research. I need a brief on yada yada yada, and then it will plan out its legal research strategy and then write the brief and then return it to you or whatever. So things are that's kind of the next evolution that I'm seeing, is a lot of agents, and they're saying once we get agents, then we're going to start seeing like agent corporations or like groups of agents all working in tandem and creating like magnificent projects and stuff. And I don't know. We'll see. Weird stuff is afoot.
It's exciting. It's very exciting. The direction it's all going is awesome, especially for those who are dialed in the legal profession. So, um, let's kind of talk about, or at least start out with our parameters of today's episode, which would be talking about automating the client communication process. How do we communicate with our clients? What's the most important part of the client communication, and how we're using technology. And our practices are different when it comes to how we each use tech when it comes to communicating with clients. But why is client communication important, and kind of how do you kind of how do you quarterback kind of your strategy when it comes to client communication through technology?
So I remember I had a CLE a couple of years ago, and the presenter, it was an ethics CLE. It was talking about all the ways to like stay out of malpractice and what things you shouldn't be doing. And the guy was like, he was pretty point blank about it. He's like, it does not matter what ethics violations you commit. If you have high client communication, no one is ever going to know, because your client will not get mad at you in most cases, and they're not going to come out. So he was like, the
Very true.
client communication is the number one thing, the number one ethics obligation you need to be following, and everything is downstream from that. So I think that's true in business too, where the ethics issues aside, like clients are going to be happier if they're getting updates. We had Martin Kravchenko on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the London Underground experiment. I don't know if you caught that piece, but he was basically discussing how the London Underground, the subway system, did a study, and they found that people were more willing to wait what was like 8 minutes if they had like a real time status tracker of where the train was. They would prefer waiting 8 minutes with the tracker than waiting 4 minutes and not having any idea when the train was going to arrive.
Yeah.
So to me, that's just such a profound insight about the importance of communication. Even if even if the wait is longer, what's actually important is the level of communication, which I find just fascinating. So to me, that's why communication matters, is client experience and keeping people happy, and paying and feeling like they got a good experience working with your firm. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I mean, obviously, what does the client need to know as part of the case, right? Like that's really important. But also taking the temperature on the client, and 'cause every client is not equal when it comes to their needs, right? Throughout the matter, right? Some
Yeah.
clients are super, super hands-on. I mean, you have to handhold them. We're talking about multiple calls, multiple texts, multiple messages, sometimes multiple, once a day. Hey, just this or that, right?
Yeah.
And some clients are, you give their instructions. We give them their next steps letter. After we've kind of set up all of our stuff at the very beginning of the case, and they get appointed, and then, next steps letter, and then they follow it, and we hear from them in 6 months, right? "Oh, hey, I'm ready to close the estate. I think we're at the 6-month mark." So,
Yep.
having that just, making sure that everybody kind of has their needs met when it comes to their level of communication, but then also, you know, outside of the facts of the case, it's important to, have that kind of real time, temperature test on the client. Like, is there an issue with this client or not? Right? Because the last thing you want is a client, having issues, but not communicating that they have issues, and then at the end of the case, giving you a one-star review and saying you're the worst law firm in existence. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
you never obviously want that to happen. So,
Yeah.
I think those things are important.
Yeah. It's wild how many, I'm sure you guys get this too, but like it's wild how many calls we get, like consultations where we get booked and people are like, "Hey, you know, I'm calling you. I have a lawyer right now, but I haven't heard from him in like 3 months. I'm not even sure if he's still alive." And then you start Googling and you're like, I seems like he's alive. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, "Have you tried
That's
to
hilarious.
call him and texted him and just haven't heard from him?" And I mean, we get like clients that like for some people, there's like, "Oh, that's a red flag for me." And it's like, sometimes it's a red flag. You can kind of tell by the attitude of the client, but like sometimes it's genuinely that there are like a lot of law firms out there that are just doing a horrible job of communicating, and they're literally losing active clients that they had already won, that were ending up taking over from them because they're not being communicated with. It's wild. It's wild how big a piece that is.
Yeah, and that, I mean, we get that all the time too, and it's like, and, I am one of those people that are like, "Yeah, this is a big red flag." If you've had a prior lawyer and, it's just, I very rarely will I wade into those waters, right? Because it's, what'll happen is you get bitten once, and then it's just like, and then you have that like, okay, if you have a prior lawyer that you've fired or they fired you, it's like, there's I'm not going down that road.
Yeah.
Next time, just give me a call. We're all over the place. Just give me a call first, okay? And I'm happy to work with you. But I understand what you're saying, and I agree there is some, you can't treat everybody like that when it comes to, there is a lot of bad communication, but
Yeah.
it's really hard to tell what the true story is on that first 30-second
Oh,
phone call, right? So
no, that's true. That's true. I have been shocked at how rarely we've been burned by that, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just able to discern when people are leaving for legit reasons versus leaving because they're crazy.
yeah,
I don't know, but whatever the reason, it is.
you just ask them, hey, are you a lunatic or no?
Yeah. So
No, I'm good.
sometimes I'm upfront with that. I'm like, this sounds like crazy person behavior. I am sorry to say that. And they will sometimes they'll give me they'll laugh at it or give me the answer I'm looking for. So, but
Yeah. I will
so
never say that to a client or a potential client. Okay, I always.
well, I'm just living life on the edge. Maybe I don't know.
Oh man,
But
that's funny.
I'm sure it's not quite that brusque. But anyway, so so actually, how are we communicating? So we talked about why it's important to communicate with clients. Like how are you doing this? So like, I think a lot of people are shooting emails back and forth and phone calls and doing. So what is your communication style or strategy look like with your clients?
So in this started, I mean, after about a year of having my own law firm, it was, I was doing the email thing, right? And I was setting up emails. I had templated emails. This is before I was using Zapier and whatnot to kind of help automate things. But I was like, I need a centralized place. I want one place of all my client communication to be, right? I want, when they upload a document, I want it to be here. When they send a message, I want it to be here, right? And I just felt like the email inbox was so segregated from everything else. And then also, like, what are you gonna, I mean, I was, creating like a folder for this or that, and you know what I mean? Trying to, the organizational piece is really hard with email. And so I struggle with that. And I was like, there's got to be something better out there. And so I started looking into different software. And this was, like I said, probably 5 years ago. And there wasn't a whole lot of great software out there when it comes to what I was looking for. And so I found this company called let me see, File Invite. So it was something that they built this system or this, platform for like the mortgage companies, right? So the mortgage companies were our high volume communication, high volume documents, right? here's a document, sign this, or here's a document, or upload. You need to upload, deeds for all your properties, or your W-2s, all that, so a collection kind of platform. So I started working with that, and I thought that this is super cool. I can request and then building out custom templates of like, hey, this is what I want from each client. So instead of having to like ask them, they could upload it, and then I could click a box that would check it for that checklist, right? So building this idea of like having checklists and communication, but it all being in one place.
Mm.
So I thought that was really important, and I kind of obsessed about that idea to start, and then, like, and to where I am now, like, the tech is great. I mean, I use Case Status, as a bolt on to, my case management software, but does all the things I wanted to do, and then and more. And they're super tech forward in that space as well. So, I know you're still doing a lot of you use email as your primary stuff, but you have a lot of, behind the scenes things happening with email, right?
Y
Talk a little bit about that.
yeah. Um, so we get I mean, we do most of our client communication, a lot of it is through text message, actually. But we
Okay,
do
cool.
get a fair amount still from email. Um, but we also get a lot of email communication that's not client related. So we even if all of it were even if all the client communication were going through a portal, we would still have a ton of email that we would need to be managing from, the courts and bond companies and, it's case, CaseNet status, filing emails and all that stuff. So we're getting a ton of email either way. So the way that we do that is, I did not like for a little while. We just had everybody had their own Gmail accounts, and um, a lot of the stuff came into mine, and we were forwarding emails, and or had a master email. It was just a mess, and things were going to a prior employee that nobody knew that they were receiving it, and then they were dropping the ball, and we're like, okay, what's going on? And there was no transparency into the status of email communication. So we shifted several years ago to using a tool called Missive, which is basically kind of like an email help desk system. One of their big competitors is Front App. But basically, what it does is it allows you to create team email inboxes. So rather than everybody having like an email address, everybody just has a login for Missive. They have their user account with Missive, and then everybody kind of shares the email addresses that are in that system. So like we have a what do we have? We have a client communications box. We have a case management box, an email triage box for like emails that don't have a natural home yet. We have an admin box, and just for admin related emails and stuff like that. And then we have a bunch of rules set up for that kind of organize those emails into buckets automatically. And and people can be assigned to a given inbox team. So like we have the case management team, all of our case management people are assigned to that box. So any email in there is their responsibility. Um, and you can go a step further and actually assign individual emails to people in their own like task list, or chat about an email within the email window. You can have like a little chat feed going beside the email, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of given us a way of making sure that email is like a we problem more than like a you problem. Like even if one person doesn't get back to that email, like somebody will, because we're all monitoring the box. And it's also been really helpful in me like delegating my email. Like I don't have to pay as close attention to what comes in, because somebody will catch it and flag me and be like, hey, this one's for Dan, pay attention to that. Which is kind of the way that I'm able to extract myself from that email communication game a little bit. But that's been kind of our experience of like rules, like trying to prevent the volume of email coming in the first place through various automations that we can get into, or techniques, and then sharing the responsibility and making it clear who's responsible for, communication when it comes in. So that's been a pretty effective strategy, for us at least.
So, I mean, some of the stuff I was, listening or at least, watching, on, Lawyer on the Beach, recently have been people talking about client portals, right? And actually building their own client portals, right? Have you looked at all into that and started kinda going down that path of, "Hey, I kinda like my email setup, and I got my setup here, but looking into, building out, a templated client portal where it just, something happens and then in your system and it automatically creates this portal in the cloud land, right? And it says, "Oh, hey, here, cloud land." I mean, basically doing what case status does for you, but just simply building it yourself. I mean, have you ever looked into
Yeah.
that or?
Yeah, so there are a lot of tools. So we use Airtable for our backend operations, and one of the nice things about Airtable is there are lots of tools for building a different front end for Airtable. Like for a while, we were using a tool called Softer, which lets you build a customized interface. It's no code. It's just drag and drop. Drop a block on there. They have client portal templates and stuff like that. And we were using that, or we still use that with our kind of enterprise probate clients, where we have like giant injury firms that send us probate cases. They have like a portal that they can log into and see, here's the 40 cases that they've referred to us and what their status is, and here's the PDF to the letters of administration and yada yada. So they can kind of get nice real-time status updates, and that has cut down a lot on the kind of back and forth, like what's the status on this one, what's the status on that one, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
um, but for our individual like consumer probate clients, we mostly continue to communicate with them through text and email and collecting data through forms. So like, they'll get sent a form at a given stage of the case, and we're like, we need you to give us this information, and they can just drag and drop, and it gets uploaded into the system. Um, but I have looked at like potentially putting some kind of portal system together on top of our Airtable base, just to let them push data in directly.
Mhm.
Um, it hasn't been a huge pain point, so it hasn't been like a top priority, but I do think at some point it would be a nice little icing on the cake in terms of client experience and giving them a nice way of interfacing. I really like what you've described as far as your case status setup. It sounds like it's a pretty awesome way to collab with the PRs in those probate cases. But
Yeah, and I get a laugh every single time that I'm in my initial consultations, and I'm like, "It's the Domino's pizza tracker for probate cases," and they always, like, laugh, but they're always like, "Oh, okay." They understand, right? They know the classic, trackers that are now involved in every time, even you order something on Amazon, right? There's some sort of there's a even though it's more, rudimentary, but there's still something, because people wanna know what the status is um, obviously being able to customize those statuses, what those are, building your own tracker, what the pieces are, and then, it kind of automatically updated the client. However you wanna do that, I think has been huge when it comes to our overall client satisfaction. I mean,
yeah,
I think we're at like a 9.52, I think, out of 10 when it comes to all of our cases across the board,
wow,
when it comes to client satisfaction. I mean, so we're just constantly trying to push that level. I mean, I want a 10 out of 10. I want a 15 out of 10 on every case because those are the people, when you do a great job, they not only are complimentary about, your work, but they go out and they tell other people about your firm, right? They're advocates for your firm. So,
yeah.
um,
I
go
but I
ahead.
I think the most important thing is that whoever, if you're out there listening to this, and you're like, "Man, that sounds awesome, but I wouldn't even know where to, like, get started with that." Like, um, to me, I think the biggest, like, most important thing is doing something, right? And it's getting some kind of automated process for, like, notifying clients of big things, and start with, like, the most obvious, like, easiest things, like, no matter what case management system you're using, it probably has some way of tracking like what phase of a case you're in. And if that's the case, like in, Clio or my case or Lawmatics or whatever, if that's the case, like they probably have some kind of system for creating an automation that says when I get to this phase, then I want to send an email or send a text message. And if they don't have it natively in the platform, like I'm not sure Clio has it natively, they probably have a really awesome Zapier or Make.com connection. Like, and that's something I found out about Clio. I used to crap on Clio a lot. And in some ways they still deserve it. But in many ways, I've been really impressed with their API. They have a beautiful API that can connect very well through Make.com and Zapier. Like you can automate just about anything you want. So if you want to automate that email or automate that text, start there with very simple. You go into Zapier, open up an account, like go into your little Clio thing where it says trigger. What I don't know what the trigger would be, like phase change or property
Yeah.
updated or something. And then step two, send an email, Gmail, or whatever your phone system is probably has a text message thing. You've built your first Zap there. It's like 2 or 3 steps, and you can send this information and notify them, hey, we're in the next phase of your case. Here's what you should expect. Um,
Hey,
easy wins for big communication gains.
hey, I'm not dead. I'm still alive. Don't go find another lawyer. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. These sorts of things make a difference. And what's funny though is like even if you are doing the work, if you don't tell your client about the work that you're doing, like they have no freaking idea. Like we've started
Yeah.
teaching them how to use CaseNet. In our onboarding email, they get like a hyperlink to their case, and they're like, "Here's your cause number. Just type it in," and so that they can monitor it. But um, but yeah, you have to tell your clients what you're doing, or they have no idea. So
I mean, because us as lawyers are always kind of not secretive, but we are making the special sauce in the back of the kitchen, right? And
Mhm.
so we are so proprietary in the things that we do, right? All the stuff, kind of, but not really, right? So it's just telling your client, hey, yeah, I mean, just this is what we're doing, this is what we've done, and they just need to know, and they just need
Yeah,
reassurance, and that's totally fine.
yeah.
One of the things I did wanna, point out and something it's been important for my firm is having all the communications in one place so that if you have like, let's say a client calls or they're like, "Hey, oh, so and so wants to talk to you. It's on my calendar." They calendar somebody and, a client wants to talk to you about this issue. And I'm like, "Haven't I talked to that client about that issue before?" Right? Or, what has been the prior correspondence, right? I mean, when you get into the volume of, one lawyer over 100 cases, right?
Mhm.
It gets harder and harder to remember conversations and whatnot. So, um, we have kind of and it's kind of we use Pipedrive for that's kind of our conversation tracking. So it uses, um, we use Just Call as our phone system, which then syncs with Pipedrive. So every time we talk to a client, it logs it into that client's file in Pipedrive. Every time we text them, it logs it in there, right? So we have that whole set of communications from calling and texting, and then we have messages through case status. I don't like that it's in 2 different places. I like it to be one.
Yeah.
Um, Something I'm working on, but I'm also playing around right now with some AI, it's, the summaries, right? You have a call summary, and I'm contemplating, I want hear your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts about having all of the client conversations, even potential client ones, obviously subject to, rules about recording and whatnot, right, with people, but, um, assuming that's not an issue, having a summary of that conversation, just AI creates the summary, it puts it right in your file, and then the summary about what took place in the call. You don't have to go back and listen to calls, doing that stuff. Like, what are your thoughts on that sort of level of
S
tracking?
So a lot of tools are starting to enable this. Some of them are better than others, and there's a lot of different ways you could do it, depending on the system that you have. Like we use a for like phones and text message. We use a tool or VoIP phone. We use a tool called Open Phone, which I love. I think it's the best um, VoIP that I at least that I have found. We used to use Ring Central, and it's fine, but it's still very traditional, a little bit old school legacy system. It
Yeah.
can do anything you can possibly imagine, but it is, I just felt it was a little uh, administratively clunky, and for various reasons, we were going to switch off and picked up OpenPhone, and it feels like a modern SaaS application. Like it's super clean and simple, and like setup takes like 5 minutes, and the settings are super intuitive and easy to understand. You're not like wading through, layers of menus and stuff. It's just all dealt with in the desktop application. Like you don't have to go to some admin portal and do all. It's very, very clean and simple. And but the main advantage that I found was really cool is just like Missive, um, we don't have separate phone lines. We have one phone that everybody can answer and text in and out from. And the system monitors who sent the text, and it keeps track of their user profile, who made the call. All texts, voicemails, and calls are all handled in one chat thread. So like every client that we talk to has their own little chat thread. So you can see every text, every phone call, every voicemail. And that platform does allow for automated two things: automated voicemail recording, and also automated email or phone call recording and AI transcription summaries.
So are you
So
using that right now or no? Or what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, the automated recording, Missouri's a one-party consent tap state, so, like, we notify clients that, the calls are recorded for quality assurance and stuff like that, but I don't know that we technically need to. It's an interesting
Yeah,
question. But we do record those, and those are saved in our system. They're not accessible out to the outside world. They're just,
sure.
um, it would just be like if we had an email communication and it's just we had it audio instead of text. That's how I think about it. At least is to
I
me,
agree.
having a recording of an audio conversation is no different than having a text transcription of a or a text of an email communication. So I know some people get like uh, jumpy about that kind of stuff. I do not at all.
Yeah,
And as far as the AI component, I am similarly unperturbed. I am not one of those people who's worried about OpenAI and Anthropic and people having access to client data because you go through their admin or their terms of service and stuff like that, and they talk about how anytime you're using it through the API, so it's all your data. They don't use it for model training. The access that they have to it is just their team can access information to troubleshoot, errors or problems. Like if you reach out and say, "Hey, this phone call didn't work. What the heck's going on?" They can on the back end look at it and see what's going on. But that's the exact same level of access that Clio has to your data, that my case has to your
sure.
data, Lawmatics does. So I'm like, this to me is not something to be worried about as an attorney. Now, that being said, caveat, do your own research, your own ethics opinion. That being said, caveat, do your own research, your own ethics opinion, and clients my kind of take on it. So I'm all for it. That's a long way of saying I'm all for it. Recording, AI transcription. One of the things that we have is I've been demoing is an AI bot that can respond to um, phone calls and text messages where it's just an AI custom GPT. I think it's a custom GPT is how I have it set up, um, and it kind of knows all about our firm and what we do and has a bunch of legal information and stuff like that. And then it's just right now it's not actually responding; it's just dumping into a Google Sheet example responses, so I can fine tune the prompts and get it better and better and better, so that eventually it could be like a not an attorney but like an assistant to say, "Hey, we got your call. We heard you're calling about this. Yada yada yada."
More personalized than
Yeah.
obviously like, just a, "Hey, thank you for calling our law firm. An attorney is currently reviewing your data," right? It's more
Yes.
like a, "Hey, Jane, I appreciate your call about your small estate affidavit and the concerns you had about involving this," right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, the idea of and I think that's the next level when it comes to law firms and when it comes to how are we, obviously, AI can be used in 100,000 different ways, right? When it comes to a law firm, whether it's marketing, whether it's content creation, whether it's actually pulling data out of your system to fill out forms, right? Which would be great in what we do in the probate space, right? But one of the things that I'm most interested in is building a model and just teaching it how to be an attorney, right? I was reading recently about there's some big law firms out there, like that's what they're doing. They're trying to create a machine learning bot that is the smartest lawyer in their law firm, right? And we talked about, yeah, depending on the type of law you're doing, but I think over time though, I think it's all about data input, right? The more data you put into it, the more it learns. And then putting up those really strict guardrails, right? But I love the idea and I'm gonna go down that path. I'm gonna start. This is my next tech project. I know I'm not supposed to change any tech stack, and I'm not going to my law firm because we're operating really well right now. But I am going to start building that on the side right now, starting that where I'm going to put the guardrails up and I'm going to start teaching it. Right.
Yeah.
And I want it to be, in 3 years, I want it to be me. I want it to respond like I would. Right. And I
I
think
know.
that it's capable. I think you're going to be able to do that. And I think that it would be, and not to, we talked about this before offline, but not to respond directly to clients unless it's, 100, 1000%, but simply like, you know, let's say you have 5 paralegals in your law firm, right? And they're all asking you questions throughout the day, right? I'm gonna take the Q&A of that question and answer, and I'm gonna put it in the model, right? They ask that question, let's at some point, the model's gonna start, answering the questions for me, right? And it'll only provide the responses that I wanted to provide, right? So what are your thoughts on that? And, like, is that plausible or feasible? And
Oh,
and,
for sure. I mean, like a ton of companies are already doing this internally with like office knowledge based tools like Guru and Notion and stuff like that. They've got they have AI chatbots built into the knowledge base already. So like if you have a even the free account on Notion now, if you have a, let's say you keep your knowledge base in Notion, your firm process SOPs, your firm research with all the research you've ever done, you've dumped into it and written like summaries of cases and important holdings and all that stuff. And here's how we handle this kind of case versus that one. Like if you have that embedded in your Notion database and they use the AI chatbot and ask a question, they'll get an answer and it'll be like directly referenced to your not only will it sound like something you would have said, but it will actually cite its sources back to like where in the knowledge base it found the answer to that question. Um, so like there are, and Guru, we used to use Guru for our knowledge base tool. It was really, really cool. It just ended up not making a lot of sense we just didn't need it anymore. But it now has launched a similar AI chatbot experience where it will call your knowledge base and return answers based on that. And as far as I know, it works pretty well. I know the Notion one works really well. It's really, really nice because it works better than like a keyword search. Like you could always do a keyword search, like small estate affidavit, and then it'll return all the documents that contain the word small estate affidavit. But the thing that's cool about semantically meaningful AI bots is that they can understand what you're asking based on its meaning, not just based on the word choice that you used. So like, maybe we had an article or a note where we talked about, oh, the conversation I had with Jane about uh, handling, I don't know, a certain kind of thing where you took notes, and it may or may not contain the words that you use in your query, but perhaps the bot is able to understand what you're getting at. Or like, oh yeah, I know that note you took with Jane, and it pulls it up for you. So yeah, I mean, you can already do some of that internally without needing to build anything custom. Now, like once you get into like client facing stuff, I mean, still tools like Intercom, for example, is if you've ever been on tons of those like enterprise SaaS applications, they've got a little chat widget in the corner where you talk to the support bubble and stuff. Intercom is one of the largest companies that provides those chat bubbles, but they have the same thing where you can not only create a knowledge base in Intercom, but you can actually have the bot pull it when talking to customers, and it can use its querying your database to be able to database knowledge to be able to respond to clients. Now it's in like a chatbot format, like it probably wouldn't work translating it to like texting or emails or anything like that, but we're there in terms of embedding knowledge in AI systems, and it's becoming increasingly commonplace. So I don't know. I don't think a lot of lawyers are doing it, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. We haven't done it yet in that way, but it's coming. It's coming fast, I think.
and for me, I'm more interested in, I know like having your, systems and processes and kind of having that sort of stuff built out into a knowledge database and, being able to ask questions to it. I love that, totally understand that. But what I'm interested in is actually the legal piece of it, right? The actual practice of law being translated from your legal mind into a bot, right? A machine learning bot.
Mhm.
And just keeping the guardrails, and then I would be super protective over the data that goes into it, right? I'm not going to give it access. I want to start from scratch, right? And I only want to feed it the pieces of data or the pieces, the responses, the answers, the questions, that I have hand selected as the gold standard. This is 100% the answer to this question, right?
Mm.
And doing that over and over and over and over until it basically will only learn from one data set of the right legal answers, right?
Um,
And then if things change and it's like, hey, this is a better way of doing it, or hey, this is then cutting out that piece and inserting the new answer, right? So
Yeah.
it's very controlled environment. That's what I would be most concerned about. But I think it can be done. I know if you give it too much access, it'll start pulling it. It'll start saying, "Oh, I don't have an answer for that, but what about this?" Well, that means
Yeah.
nothing.
That's true. That's totally possible. Yeah. Oh, giving bots too much context is also a concern. And you run into that in different. I think that a lot of the legal research platforms are running into that problem right now,
Yeah,
where they have these gigantic vector databases storing thousands and thousands and thousands of cases and statutes and yada. And then you ask a complex query to the bot, and it has that huge repository of data that it cannot possibly keep all in context. The context window, even on the largest models right now, it's only like 200,000 tokens, which is, hundreds of pages. Well, like we're talking about databases with that tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of pages
yeah,
worth of text that it can't hold all at once. So the best it can do is do an embedding query of the database where it embeds its question, compares the embedding to the database, finds semantically related things. But like, what if it misses something? And that's what I was running into when I was doing demos of these is, it might return stuff that's obviously related. But like, what about that statue that on its face doesn't necessarily seem related, but when you look at the cross reference of reference of section numbers and the fact that this issue relates to this, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't realize that the rules relating to conveyances of real estate applied to the Power of Attorney Act in the state of Missouri. Weird, but true. Um, and those sorts of things. It's too much context in some cases to answer the question. So, but yeah, it's an interesting issue that I imagine they'll solve eventually with greater computational capacity. But
yeah. And so where would I start though? I mean, and I'm thinking is that you just starting with a custom GPT and then just only uploading what you want into the database or what?
yeah, so that'd be. I mean, there's several ways that you could approach that. Like just to my mind, like the easiest thing to do with like the least amount of like techie hackery would probably be a custom GPT in paid pro chat GPT. You could either do it as a custom GPT through their interface where you can build it without code or anything, or you could go through the backend where you go through developer.playground.openai or whatever, and you can set up an assistance through their assistance API, which is basically custom GPTs but via the API. So if you wanted to set it up through a Zapier connection or a Make connection, you would use the assistance API rather than a custom GPT. But yeah, I mean, and then those are set up in a way that you can like I've done it a couple of times where you can, fill out a big document that has answers to questions, or I did it with the probate code, and you just upload the document to the GPT, and then what OpenAI does in the background is they take that document, they break it into chunks, they embed it in a vector database, so then any future queries to the bot are pulled against the embedding of the document, and it will return a response based on its knowledge store. And you can add whatever you want to that knowledge store, and in its instructions, tell it how you want it to respond and what you want it to consider and not consider and stuff like that. So
So
that's probably the easiest way to go.
do you own your vector database then when it comes to that? I mean, do you, I mean, that's what I would be concerned about. I mean, so if you're building that through, a custom GPT, are you able to always take control and manipulate and have access to that vector database, or how does that work through if you're building it through them?
So with OpenAI, it's a little more. It's like part of the platform. Like they call it like a vector store. If you get into their playground system, like you can see the vector store set up, and you can go into their section where you can see all the different vector stores that you've created, and you can manually create new ones, for example, or you can also have it like people don't realize this, but like every time you upload a document to ChatGPT and say like, hey, can you read this PDF for me or analyze this Excel spreadsheet or whatever, it is actually creating a vector store in the background that you can't see
Oh, cool.
until you log in through the Playground backend developer API. But you can
Can you
also
migrate?
can you
Can you
what?
migrate your data out of there or no?
That's a
Can you
good question.
migrate?
I don't know.
Because that's what I'd be concerned about. And after all of our conversations now, that's the first thing that comes into mind is where is the data going? Can I migrate it out?
I don't know. That's a
Frankly.
good question. That's a good question because like you go to a lot of different databasing platforms are now allowing vector embedding as part of their like offering. They're like saying, hey, here you can create all your normal database properties like customer email, customer phone number, but you also get this fancy vector embedding property where you can assign this is probably a longer, more detailed conversation than necessary, but you can assign like I think they usually do it by like cosine, or they compute a number that represents its location in the database that's computed by a large language model. And you can attach that to a record, and then your record has now been embedded, or once you embed it in the database, then it can pull against that cosine number when you ask a future query. And that's how it decides whether it's semantically related or not. It's actually pretty crazy, but I don't know whether you
And
can pull it out. That's a good
and
question.
I guess my follow-up with that to that would be, is there any platforms where that are just vector databases where
Yeah,
you can just start a node and then you can layer it with a GPT that connects to it or something,
yeah,
some other AI component? And I think that's where I would want to start because like what I'm talking about building is not like, oh, a chatbot for my website or to talk to, this or that. I'm talking
mhm,
about building something that would be the best um, knowledge, the most knowledgeable piece,
yeah,
non-human entity in Missouri to be able to to do probate work, and
yeah,
that's what I'm going to build, right? Is because we
yeah.
are working to build the best probate law firm in existence, and so working on that is important, I think.
Yeah, and you get a lot more control over it when you use your own database rather than the kind of the native one from OpenAI, with their custom GPTs. Is like you can set up a new database in like Pinecone, for example, is super popular standalone vector database, and their Pinecone is really nice because it's cheap to get started, and it also has a really nice make and Zapier connector, so you can
Nice.
actually no code with it. So like you
Love
know
that.
like right, exactly. So like a message comes in or whatever, you can through a make or a Zap automation, you can query the Pinecone database, pass through the query, embed the query first in the language model, and then pass the embedding through to the database, and then it'll return the response based on what's in there. And you can embed new material. Like now, it's a little more manual because like you'll have to, I believe you have to take care of like data chunking and stuff like that yourself, and creating the embeddings yourself. Whereas OpenAI just kind of abstracts that away and takes care of all that for you. But but as far as storing Pinecone is super popular. I'm looking at using Supabase but that's a
Cool, man.
that's a code that's a code based one. You got to know how to code to use Supabase.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
thanks.
but Zano is a really powerful backend. Martin Kravchenko is kind of the go-to Zano guy that I know. Whereas basically building no code database backends, and they recently added a vector embedding system where any record that gets put into that database can be embedded in their vector system automatically. And so they've kind of abstracted away a lot of the chunking and storage problems that you might have to deal with like Pinecone or something like that. But those are pretty sophisticated systems. And which is why I say like a custom GPT or an assistance API is by far the quickest and easiest way to get started. But a more like powerful thing is definitely using your own database implementation. But pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I feel like we could sit here and talk about this stuff forever. But we are getting closer to time for today's episode, and we have to go back to doing that thing we do, which is run law firms. So,
Yeah.
um, all right, let's move forward and do our tech tool or tech tip of the week or of the episode for today. I was in this goes along something we talked about earlier, but I was in a Zoom call with some people this week, and I got immediately after the call, I got a summary about our call. And this is not new, right? But I thought it was super accurate and awesome. So it was actually Zoom's AI companion
Mhm.
that they have part of Zoom now. I mean, it was extremely accurate in its summary. I mean, and that's the most important thing for me. I've played with these before, but they just weren't very accurate. It's kind of like if it's not accurate, then what's the point, right? The AI companion on Zoom was super accurate. I mean, it was literally did not miss a single thing. It had multiple paragraphs, to things that people discussed, next steps. It was
Nice.
very very well done when it comes to that. So take a look at Zoom's AI companion for your Zoom calls. We use Zoom a lot with my firm, not so much with clients, but outside of when it comes to vendors and other people and stuff like that. So check it out.
Nice, nice. Yeah, my tip this week would be on this theme of client communication. And if you're interested in starting to embed AI into your systems, one of my favorite use cases that is just an easy low hanging fruit is automating, like let's say you're in a state where you get automated notice emails from the court. Figure out how to send those through ChatGPT, through Zapier or Make.com. And like, for example, I'll give you an example. The easiest thing we do, like we get in an email every time somebody in probate case gets appointed a personal representative, we get basically the same email that comes through where it's like letters of administration granted or letters testamentary granted, yada, yada, yada. So we have a simple Gmail filter. Gmail filters are crazy powerful. And if you don't know how to build a Gmail filter, just ask ChatGPT. Say, hey, ChatGPT, I want to filter for only these kinds of emails containing this words. How would you write this filter? And it'll spit out the Gmail filter and test it in your Gmail account and make sure it's returning only the emails you want. But, start a Zap. Gmail filter finds the court email. Step 2, sends it to ChatGPT for a extract data. It's called a extract structured data step. Extract the pieces you want. Cause number, case name, decedent name, whatever. And even if before that, you can add an extra step that says, determine if this is an email that is granting letters of administration or something. And if it is, then proceed through the automation. You can have like a fork in the path there. And it'll return all that information in a structured way. Then you can say, all right, now, look up in our case system, which case is this attached to, and then send them an email. Very, very super, super powerful automation that we've been implementing for our court emails. Not that hard to set up, but check it out. Experiment. What my tip is just to experiment with running things through ChatGPT automatically through Zapier or Make.com and get creative with how you would do that in your particular setup. It's a lot of fun. It's a very addicting thing once you get doing it.
I love it. Well, Dan, I really appreciated the time that we spent today.
Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, right? Or wherever you get your podcasts. That helps people find us. Super, super important. And if you want to take the conversation offline, don't hesitate to join the Legal Tech Collective Facebook group where we talk about tech and automation and legal issues every day. And that's it for this week, guys. Thank you. Until next time.
Thanks, Dan. See you next week.
See ya.